Welcome to the Yeshiva Shalmayla. This is David Lichtenstein, and this week we're going to be speaking about the coronavirus in Halacha and hashkafic. We have a wonderful register of guests: Rabbi Doniel Neustadt, the Roth, used to be the Avbezdin of Detroit, Enikler Rabbi Yankiv, mechaber of the Emes Yankiv, the Roth of Pine Village, etc., etc. We'll be speaking to him about many halacha topics. Tefillah b'tzibur, can we do it via camera? Sefira, can we move a wedding to the days of Sefira if the wedding hall won't give us back our money? Selling Chamud's Gomer this year, etc., etc. We will have from Lakewood, New Jersey, Rabbi Dr. Doniel Roth, I believe Lakewood's only Yale graduate, or the only Yale graduate who is also a Rosh Chabura. We'll be speaking to him about many of the medical topics. How do we determine who to give a ventilator to when there's an insufficient number of them, a paucity of them? What about mikvahs? Maaros, how does a Rav do? So these are going to be the topics. From Lakewood, again, we have the head of the Bikkur Cholim of Lakewood, and also the head of all the friendship houses, Rabbi Yehudah Kassirer, the tzaddik Rabbi Yehudah Kassirer. What's actually going on in the hospitals? How many people are sick? The interview with Rabbi Kassirer was around 3 days ago, and every 4 days the number doubles. Whatever number he gives you, double it. And then we will have from New York City, from Flatbush, Rabbi Avrohom Sandler, Maggid Shiur, who believes that it's mostly a hoax, the entire coronavirus. He's not alone. Many agree with him. And that the people who are dying, I kid you not, are dying of fear. Here is a clip from him.
My message is that closing shuls and closing yeshivas for health reasons is a terrible idea.
I think it's important just talk about this in passing because a surreal story. Last week, a Rav from Tina called me up and he asked me for mechaber. I get this quite often on who do we give priority to if there's an insufficient number of ventilators. At the same time, right, in Lakewood, as well as Williamsburg, there were chasanas for 500 people. And it was a little bit bizarre to me. It reminded me, the Gemara in Hanuzakin says that there was a city called Turmalka, that when the Romans came in, on one half of the city they were butchering people, they were beheading people and killing them, etc. And on the other half of the city they were still partying. Now, Lakewood, Williamsburg, Teaneck, they're not very far from each other. One is what do we do about ventilators, and the other one is chasanas, etc. There was a clip going, and it's a limited number. When I say this, most people are being very respectful of the law. They're being respectful of what the CDC, respectful of the World Health Organization, but there are exceptions, who just don't believe it. There was a clip went out from a group of Chabad Bachrim, and I say that Chabad is it's like the U.S. Army, so there's so many different groups. But they were talking about their emunah and betachin and how they're not going to change anything they do. And I would just tell these Bachrim, I'm very young millennials, you're not really in danger. Do you know that? A report just came out that if you're under 30, your chances of, being impacted by this are a small % of a percent. Like it's an insignificant amount. But if you're older, or if you are alternatively, if you're older, or if you have one of either heart disease, diabetes, or you have compromised immune system, if you're over 80, the chances are 1 in 5 that if you get it, you will not live. So I would just ask these boys, I would say, doesn't Chabad have such a history of venerating the yashishim? Not like America. America sends their elderly to the nursing home. Chabad in particular, from the beginning of time, the old Hasidim, Reb Isaac Hammeler, Reb Bill Parashava, you have Reb Shlomo Chaim, you had Reb Mendel Futterfuss, they used to say stories about these today, the holy Reb Yoel Khan. They venerated their elders, and you know what? That's who's going to be at risk. It's not going to be one of these healthy young, 20-year-olds, stark v'aferd. So what happened to that respect? But I want to say, this is upsetting because it's made it into the papers. It's like keep your yeshiva open, teach Gemara with a side of Chilul Hashem, a side of Leisamid El Dam Reyecha, a side of Gram Retzicha. But I think we should look kindly at this because we have a Kabbalah that the Chatoim of Klal Yisrael come from Roimimus, not from Shiflus. Even our Chatoim come from nobility, a place of eminence. We are a nation. This is particularly difficult for us, what's going on, because we are Knesset Yisrael. And Knesset Yisrael is about Tefillah b'tzibur. right? We talk about ish echad b'leiv echad. And attendant to this are the mitzvahs concomitant is chesed, Bikkur, Cholim, tzedakah we have that's non-perennial to any nation. Do you know that the wait time for a kidney is 7 years in America, but 30 days if you're echad, if you're part of, if you're from the Kahal Adas Mimana. What did we just say, Purim? Lech kinois kol haYehudim. So the concept of, tzibur by us, in fact, in Maisa Bereshis, it says tov 7 times. It only says loy tov 1 time. What is that? Loy tov hayos adam levadai. So this is quarantine for us is incredibly difficult, right? The orders of the CDC to close all places of public assemblage, restaurants, shuls, schools, it goes against the kernel of who we are. So I understand these people, the Bachrim or the yeshivist that aren't listening, but we also have a klal in Yiddishkeit that bitula zuhi kiyuma. Sometimes, for a chassid, and I'm not talking about today chassid, I'm talking about what the Gemara calls a chassid, precious is the greatest midah for a chassid, right? A woman, tahayla chacharisha. But what does the Gemara say? That if an isha's tevea benar, and a chassid sees her and he doesn't extend his hand to save her, the Gemara calls him a chassid shaita, right? Because he's overan loisamed al damriyecha. So there's a tension. There are mitzvahs. There are times we're supposed to do it, and there are times nice. In Shlomo HaMelech, who was chacham mikol adam, in his Sefer Kehelas, he has the 28 itim, those ace and an ace, the opposite. What do we say? Ace lachashos. There's a time to be silent. Ace ladaber. What does Rashi say? L'chol zman ve'ace. L'chol chayfetz. Everything there's a ratzon Hashem for each side of it. So Rashi says ace lachashos. Pa'amim she'adam shaisik. There are times when you're quiet. You don't say Ameini Heshmei Rabbah. You don't learn with your chavrus in yeshiva. And what? Umakabel schar. K'may Rashi says, Vayidoim Arein. He was silent. And Rashi continues, V'zacha shenisyached imoy hadibur. Because he was silent, he was zeicha to, which he otherwise wouldn't have had. Rashi says, Vayedaber Hashem el Arein. Yain v'shecher al tesht. Right? So, there is an ace lachashais, and that is l'chol chayfetz. That's the ratzon of the Rabbi Shalom. Here is a clip from my son-in-law Rabbi Yehudah Goldvich that he sent out to his talmidim and his friends. I think it's a powerful clip.
Mazel tov, mazel tov. Some amazing news, Baruch Hashem. This morning my wife gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. And I'll tell you what I would love. I would love to invite each and every one of you to come to my Shalom Zachar, and that we should share in Divrei Torah together, and we should make a l'chaim, and we should sing, and we should dance, and it should be a time of romimos and dveikus with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But I'm telling you what I'm asking of you. I'm asking of each and every one of you to please stay home. I'm even begging you to stay home. And even if you come to my door and you knock on my door, I probably will not let you in. This Shalom Zachar is going to be me, B'ezrat Hashem, my wife, my family, and the baby. Maybe a brother or two. And that's it. And then I was thinking to myself, not only is the Shalom Zachar going to be just me and my family, the bris is probably also going to be the same thing. The Shulchan Aruch paskins in Yehudah, heicha de efshar, you make a bris with 10 people. But if it's not possible, so then you do it without a minyan. And this reminded me of an amazing story that I heard from the mouth of Simcha Shlomo Levine, the son of Rabbi Levine, about another bris that was held with just a few people. Rav Simcha Shlomo Levine said that in his neighborhood, in Yerushalayim, there was a Moel who came from Russia. He was a Moel there for many, many years. And this Moel told him the following story. He said that he was living in St. Petersburg, and he got a request to do a milah in a village very far away. Around a week drive it would take to get to this village. And he wasn't sure, the Moel wasn't sure, if this was a setup by the KGB. He knew that the KGB was on his tail, and he knew that if he was caught making a bris milah, that could be life in jail. So it took him 2 weeks to verify that it was actually a milah. It took him a week to plan his trip to this remote village, and it took him another week to actually get there. He finally finds the house. He gets there a month later. He knocks on the door. There's no mezuzah. And he says, is this the house? Terrifying that maybe it was a setup. He walks into the house. The father says, yeah, come. They bring him in to the back room. At the milah was the father, the mother, and one other family sibling, the grandfather. And he said the usher and the baby, the Moel checks the child. He looks great. He says the bracha asher kedishanu tzivanu ala milah and lachnisa b'riso shel Avrohom Avinu. He does the milah, wraps the child up, pours the cup of grape juice, about to make the bracha in order to name the child, and the mother grabs the child from the moel's hand, and she starts kissing it from head to toe. She's kissing the boy for 2 minutes straight. After 2 minutes of kissing and hugging the baby boy, she gives it back to the moel, and she says, okay, now you can name him. The moel didn't know what was going on. He played like this was normal. And then he named the child, and he gave the baby boy back to the mother. The mole stuck around the entire day, and towards the end of the day, he was so curious. He asked the father, he said, is everything okay with your wife? And the father was like in shock. He said, what do you mean, is everything okay with my wife? Of course, she's an amazing, incredible woman. So he said, listen, I've done hundreds, maybe thousands of milas before. He says, I've never ever seen a mother grab the child from the moel's hand and start kissing him. So the father turns to the moel and he says, you think my wife is crazy? Let me tell you what my wife did. He says, right now, from the moment we asked you to do the milah until you came took a month. Look at our child. Our child isn't just a month old. Our child is almost 3 months old. It took us 2 months till we found you. And after we found you, it took a while till we got to you. And then you had to verify and find. Our child is close to 3 months old. When my son was born, my wife made a neder that she will never kiss her son until he has a bris milah. Today is the first day that my wife was able to kiss her son. What an amazing story of mesirah nefesh. What an amazing story of mesirah nefesh to do the mitzvah of bris milah. We all have an opportunity this Shabbos to be moser nefesh. And it's not like it was back then. Just stay home. Stay in your house. Make a l'chaim. Do it b'simcha. Do it b'simcha. Be lebedik. Have zmiros with your family. Sing, dance, knowing that you're saving another life. When you get up to Shemayim after 120, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to ask you in the Beis Din Shemala, did you ever save a life? It says, Kol HaMekayim Nefesh Achas B'Yisrael Kilu Kiyam Olam Ma'ala. You can answer with certainty, absolutely yes. I saved a life because during this corona pandemic, during this epidemic, I stayed home and I made sure that no one is going to get sick because of me. So when we're home this Shabbos, I ask you to do one thing, say Dvar Torah, make a l'chaim. We'll do it from a distance. We don't even have Zoom to connect us, but let's do it. Let's do it b'simcha. Let's be happy that we have the schus to be a matzil nefesh achas b'Yisrael. Have a wonderful, amazing Shabbos, and b'schus the simcha, b'schus the mitzvahs that we continue to do. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yomer L'tzar Seinu Dai. All those who are sick should be healthy, and we should be able to go back to learning face to face together and experiencing Yadus like the way it was meant to be. All the best. Good Shabbos, bracha v'atzlacha, and mazel tov.
And I'm sure that a child who had a shalom zacha with 4 people and a bris with 6, he was mekayim eis lachashais. Be'ezra Hashem will be zeichel ledaber in Mashchina. So the eis lachashais is a Klal Yisrael, a holy thing. So it says loy toiv he'is adam levada. It's true, but on the other hand, it also says vayivaser Yaakov levadai. And what do Chazal say? Ma ata levad bel yoinim, just like Haviyachol is levad bel yoinim. Afhu levadai betachtainim. He was daim l'shchina at that time, daim the Haviyachol himself. Before we go to our guests, what is the message for us? 30 days before Pesach, this makkah, this microbe, coronavirus, and we know the Gemara says, "Ein piraniyas bala'olam ela b'shvil Yisrael." The Gemara in Habal Yevimtai, and the Gemara darshins it from the pasuk, "Amarti achtiri," right? Oisi techi musar. Look at me and be makabel musar. Look at me as the umayis olam are saying. Look at the piraniyas they're getting. So all this piraniyas is to teach us something. There's a message here. What is the message? Different Rabbanim have said different messages. Here's one clip from a Rav.
He's going to do a parade in Yerushalayim. 50,000 goyim come to Yerushalayim, and the parade with all these dirty people, and the government in Israel, the mayor of Yerushalayim, they all let them do in Yerushalayim, in the city of Hashem. It's called the city of the palace, says the Ramban. In Yerushalayim, you parade against Hashem.
So he believes the message has to do with the gay march in Yerushalayim. Now, that doesn't speak to me because honestly, I don't know. It didn't happen in Eretz Yisrael. It's not in Eretz Yisrael. It didn't happen to gays. I mean, this was a bunch of Chinese who were heterosexual. And is that really something that is like for us, the Yidden around the world, we're supposed to be worried about the gay march in Eretz Yisrael? It's like when When Yosef, the Khartoumim came to Pari, they said, you'll have 7 daughters, you'll have the 7 sons. I said, it's not talking to me. And I'm sure there are many ways let me tell you what I see here, and feel free to disagree. Today we have the power of technology. Do you know that an iPhone is as powerful as a supercomputer that was the size of a person's living room and cost millions and millions of dollars in the 1960s? Today, they've raised the lifespan of people by 50% through the wonders of modern medicine. And we're so enthralled by science. Do you know the biggest religion in the United States now is called the nuns? And that's not with a U, that's N-O-N-E-S. The atheists are the single largest religion in America. Somebody wrote a book, Shem Rishon Yerkov, an Israeli, Yuval Harari, called Homo Deus, man who has become God. It's the selfie generation. We fear no one. Technology is the new God. And what happens? A microbe. You know how big this microbe is, the coronavirus? It's 1,000 picometers. It's a billionth of a foot, an 80 millionth of an inch, right? Compared to a microbe, one of the bugs, we had on the bugs, he had the 50 times microscope we spoke about. Compared to the bug, it would be like a penny next to the Empire State Building. That's the bug that is usher to eat on the lettuce is the size of an Empire State Building. And you need a microscope to see that. This would be a penny next to it. That's how tiny it is. And what did this thing do? The Rabbi Shalom sent this microbe. It brought all commerce in the world to a stop. All socializing, right, disappeared. Right? It shut down the temples of the nuns, the temples of gastronomy, right? The Emmys, the Grammys, their cathedrals of hedonism have become ghostly quiet, all by a microbe, 1,000 picometers, an 80 millionth of an inch, right? What does it talk about our gaiva, right? Look what the world was brought to its knees by. This week is Parshas HaChodesh, and Pesach is about matzah. What is matzah? What is the message of the matzah? We all begin humble, simple, authentic, flour and water, like a matzah. What happens with time? Egotism sets in, vanity, conceit, gaiva. We start to believe in ourselves. We start to put Instagram, narcissism. We rise, we swell, we become arrogant. Right? And with that, we lose our sense of self. We lose our emunah. We lose our authenticity. We have no more memory of the purity, the neshama tahira sheneshatabi that we came from. We, chas v'shalom, like the 25%, they become nuns, and we look at them. And what is the matzah once a year? A time to reset. Right? To remind us of the fragility of being human, the shatterable nature of our existence, of the purity that we came from. That's the message of the matzah. Return to yourself. That's the message of the matzah. Shleishim yoyim kaidem achag, the Rabbi Shalom brought this tiny microbe to shatter the arrogance, the egotism, the Instagram, the self-belief, the narcissism of the world, to bring it to its feet and to remember our humanity. I believe that could be a message. A Purani is bala'olam ela b'shvil Yisrael. What does Rashi say? Kadesh yasu tshuva. Maybe that's the message here. Let's go to the riddle of the week. Be'ezra Hashem, this is going to be over at some point, and then we're going to come back to Shul, and the question is, are we going to learn 4 parshas, 2 parshas, 6? Like, you're going to get up in the morning, they're going to get up, okay, we're leaving 6 parshas now. The Kohen gets a parsha, the Levi gets a parsha, all the Yisraelim, everybody gets a parsha. What are we going to do when this is over? That is the riddle of the week. So before we go to our guests, I want to mention, this is a halacha program, and this halacha I never thought would be negay in our lifetimes. But if you look at the Beis Yosef at the end of Reish Pehei, he brings from the Raivan, he says, this that you say that a person should read Shnayim Mikra ve'Echad Targum, the main takana was really for a yachid who's living in a village that doesn't have a minyan to read the Torah on Shabbos. So he should be mechavin the Shah when they would lay in the Beis HaKnesses, that the Shnayim Mikra of Echad Targum is sort of a Kriyas HaTorah for a Yachid who doesn't have a Minyan. And here, basically all of Klal Yisrael is not going to have a Minyan this Shabbos, so we Rekayim the sheet of the Ravan that the Beis Yosef brings. And even though we hold that the Shnayim Mikra of Echad Targum is even if you are in a Minyan, right, like the Rambam, etc., but the thought of the Ravan, that it's true that it's to know the Torah too if you have a Minyan, but certainly he says if you don't have a Minyan, this should be a Kriyas HaTorah. So even if you're not yotzei Shnayim, even if you're not makbid on it, which it's Halacha and Shulchan Aruch we should be, to do it every week, if you ever did it in your life, you pick the Shabbos, this should be the Shabbos that you do Shnayim Mikra V'Echad Targum. I want to say one more comment, the Halacha comment. I know that you have people that they think they're being framax. And I want to read a Halacha in Shulchan Aruch that we spoke about it last week, but I think it's important to say again. This is a Ramah, because the Chazon Ish used to say about Kanoim, he says they're like Yidden before Matan Torah. We have a Shulchan Aruch. I'm going to read a Lashon of the Ramah in Kuf Tezayin in Yeridei. We said it last week, but I'll say it again. The Ramah says, Yesh livroyach mena'ir kishadever be'ir. When there's a gefa, a plague in the city, run from the city. V'yesh lotzesh mena'ir betchilas hadever. Run in the beginning, not after there's like a lot of deaths. Right away in the beginning. V'loy b'sayfai. He brings it from the Maril who lived during the Black Plague in the 1300s. V'chol elu hadvarim he mishum sakana. And then he says, V'aser lismoich anes. You can't say, no, the Torah is going to save me, the Tefillah b'tzibur. The Ramah thought of it all, right? He says, you're not allowed to be Soymech Hanes, and then he finishes, L'sakei nafshi v'chol ki yotzei b'zeh. And then what does Rabbi Kivega? Right on the spot in the Chedusha Rabbi Kivega, if you look on the spot, he says, Kishem midas hadin metucha, when there's a midas hadin in the world, and certainly now, you're going to hear, in Lakewood, there are many people already in the ICU. There's close to 100 people who have coronavirus, and there's a dozen in the ICU, right? Kishamidas hadin metucha ein mafchin bein sadik l'rasha. Crown Heights, Williamsburg, half of Monroe we heard from a doctor has it. Many people, sadly, statistically, life is in danger. Kishamidas hadin metucha ein mafchin bein sadik l'rasha. You could be the biggest sadik. The Rabbi Kivega says in this halacha, run for your life. We invented quarantine. The Jews invented quarantine. The Gemara 1,500 years ago, the Maril 700, 800 years ago, the Shulchan Aruch brings it far. Yes, quarantine started with the Jews. And we're going to speak about with Rabbi Neustadt, but if somebody opens up this shul or makes a wedding for 100 people, and then somebody dies, was the person who did it, is he a rodeph? It's questionable because the rodeph really means you have to do it b'shev, b'kum v'aseh, you're running, somebody who's b'zayif shtaris, somebody who's a moisa. Could you be b'shev al tasa rodeph? I don't know. But a gram reitzeach? I don't know. And a gram reitzeach has a din of misa b'dei shemayim. Does somebody want to come Yom Kippur and say, maybe because of my actions of not following the Shulchan Aruch, keeping my yeshiva, my shul open? Look, the Ramah Mistama davened with a Minyan. You would have to say he was an Erlicha person. The Maril was probably an Erlicha person. The Magen Avrohom in Arachayim brings the same halacha from the Sholah Kaddish. These were Erlichid, and they davened with a Minyan, and they still said, run into the forest, run as far as you can. So would somebody want to come Yom Kippur and say, maybe I killed somebody, I was a gram reitzeach? I think that's because of my chasana, my shalom zacha, my sheva brachas. That's the question I put to you. Should we be following the Shulchan Aruch, or should we be kanoim and putting a lot of people's life at risk and be yovel lesamid al damriyecha, etc., etc. And let me ask you something else. My doctor was critically ill. Doctor here in Muncie, he caught corona. Right? They said you should say Tehillim for him. Right? Yitzchak ben Esther. My question to you is, we have medical professionals, and I have 2 daughters-in-laws who are nurses. They're putting their lives at risk for people who are ill. So you have one person who's putting their life at risk, and the other person who's saying, "Chai van de ganze Welt," and I'm going to catch it. It's just something to think about. Do you want to stand Yom Kippur and say somebody died because of my chasana, my yeshiva, or my shul?
Joining us from Lakewood, New Jersey, is Rabbi Doniel Neustadt, formerly the Av Bezdin of Detroit. He's the Roth of Pine River Village in Lakewood. He's also the Poisik for Lifeline. Einikal Rabbi Yankiv Kamenetsky, the author of the MS Yankiv. It's an honor to have you with us, Rabbi Neustadt.
Shalom Aleichem, how are you?
Baruch Hashem. So, Rabbi Neustadt, there was, recently an article in the news that the president actually, they had a call with a bunch of former rabbanim, and they said, we should be limiting chasanas, bar mitzvahs, shuls, etc. And it would seem that many of the community don't agree with that. And I'll read with you some of the comments. So far, 100 people have died from coronavirus. Every day, thousands of people die from vehicle accidents. Therefore, we should immediately ban all cars until we can figure out how to stop this needless loss of life, etc. Let me read a few more.
Whose comments are you reading?
From the comments on the Vasses Nayas article from the...
Generally, you should ignore those comments.
Okay, that's the first sock we're getting.
That's not a good way to start off, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just saying, what I've been screaming the alarm on this. I had on 2 weeks ago Rabbi Dr. Aaron Galat, the head of infectious diseases, and he was saying, people should be, controlled and not get alarmed. And I was screaming, no, we should get alarmed. This is a pandemic. According to the CDC, we could see as many as 6% deaths across the entire population. That's what they're seeing of the affected people in Italy. And, we had on somebody from Italy I spoke to. They said literally every hour there's another Levaya. How concerned should we be, and what should we be doing?
We should be very concerned. We should follow all the rules that the government and the CDC and the concerned and the infectious disease doctors are telling us what to do. We have to be machmir in Pekuach Nefashos, not mekel, and there's no question about it. I think everybody's in agreement with that. Maybe some people aren't listening, but anybody who is a responsible person understands that you have to do the utmost to protect human life, even if it's a suffix. Certainly, if it looks really, really real, there's no question about it.
And what about people who say, be mispal, not to look? There's a letter for Reb Chaim Kanievsky. We should not, close the schools. How do we respond to that?
Closing the schools is a controversial move. Not even amongst the experts. Not everybody agrees that unleashing tens of thousands of children into the streets and into the public parks and into the restaurants and wherever is a smart thing. Not everybody agrees that is the right way because nobody really knows. A lot of it is built on guesswork. There's no precedent. There's no data. So some say this, some say that. So you could argue that both ways. But the fact that we need social distancing and the fact that this is Rahman al-Islam and advancing the real sakana is indisputable. And we need to do what, we're not the experts. The doctors are the experts. We rely on medical opinion for everything which is halachically related as well. And this is no different. We got to do what they say.
So here's a shiloh somebody called me up with. He said they're supposed to get married next week. They called up the Chassan Hall, and, they're making a wedding for the usual Jewish wedding. It's 300 or 400 people. And the guy said, look, I just can't cancel it. You put down 50%, you're going to lose your money. And this guy's an Araman. He says, well, I can't afford. He says, and if I bring people in, I'm creating a sakana. So the owner of the hall thought, it's a big from hall, and he said, listen, the only thing I could do for you, ask your local Orthodox rabbi. He said, during the Sefira, we are closed, between Rosh Chodesh and Lag Baimer. So he says, if you want, I could move your wedding to then, and I won't charge you any difference. I'll just delay it. So he asked me, b'makom hefsid meruba, can he make the wedding between Rosh Chodesh and Lag Baimer, and can he invite his 350 people?
The simple answer is no, that he can't. I mean, he might invite, but the 350 people are not going to come. So he's going to be dancing himself. People are not going to come. It might be hefsid meruba for him, but it's not hefsid meruba for the people. They certainly don't have a heter to attend such a chasana. And even b'makom hefsid meruba, we're not necessarily making to do chasanas in the sphere. Don't forget that the sphere itself came because of a plague, because of what happened to the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. That was also Maggid. So we're not gonna play around with that as a general. I'm not saying there may be exceptions, but in general, they're not gonna find Rabbanim b'matir to do that.
Well, you have Paiskim who do say that you could make a chasana during the Yemei Sefira for somebody who wasn't Mekayim Puravu. It's Bavadia brings or Advaz.
But it's not Lamaisa.
It's just a minute.
You're right. There are some places can hold that way, but Lamaisa, when was the last time? I mean, every Bacher is not Mekayim Puravu, so every Bacher's chasana should be able to be done during Sefira. That's unheard of, right?
Yeah, but I guess it would be somebody who otherwise would Yechoshish would not be able to.
Right, but that's not the case here.
Well, the case is here that somebody waited their entire life. This is their one time. They're going to have a wedding with 10 people, and they're saying, yes, could we, because of the minig, it's not brought, not in Gemara, not in Bavli, not in Yerushalmi, not in sefarim, the minig not to make a wedding during Sfira, do we say, okay, this is an emergent time, and we don't want to be Mitzayer, Chasanim, Kala, something they'll never forget their entire life, and do we make an exception?
No. You have to get married, you need a minyan, you don't need more. And that's not an exception. Sometimes, unfortunately, things happen. A lot of people are getting married this week and next week and last week with 10 people or 20 people or 30 people. In Lakewood, every night is a chasana in somebody's backyard. That's okay. Just because we've gotten spoiled and we think that you have to have 400 people by a chasana, that means it's the right thing to do. Who says? Chasanas could work very well in a beautiful setting with 50 people.
Well, 50 people is also dangerous.
I'm just saying, but they're allowing 50 people.
Yeah, but it's still dangerous, 50 people. So if you were saying, I can invite 50 people, it's going to be grandparents and this and that, some of them...
We're just so used to one way that we think that it's a tragedy if we don't have it. It's not a tragedy. These are not tragedies.
What about people who don't sell chametz gamer, which is, many people I know, including myself. This year, if there's a chash that after Pesach you may not be able to get goods in the store, would that be a reason to sell chametz gamer?
Well, look, if there's a real chashash that there's going to be a widespread shortage of food, and then, we could find a heter for that. I mean, you'll have to be mataneder, because it is a real minig, and it's a minig toiv, and you're going to have to present yourself to Bezdin and explain the circumstances why you would like to change your minig for one time. And I would say that that's an open. You could argue this that this is if it's true, we don't have to suffer shortages of food, and if that's a real concern, that's a possibility. I don't foresee it happening. They're not talking about shortages of food right now. They're not saying that that's a real concern. So I don't see that being applicable, but you are correct. In this theoretical situation where there will be a real shortage of food, it will be open for many people to sell chametz gamer, which is mutter al pi halacha, and is only asur according to some paiskim, and some people are naig that way. So this is a situation where a minig like that can be changed. It's a private minig. It's not a minig of Kol Yisrael, as opposed to the case of the sfira that you mentioned before, which is a minig shenagu Kol Yisrael. So over there you have al tita shtar simecha, and you can't be mataneder in that.
Yeah, I mean the only exception being is that here the minig is because people hold that it's not a real mechira. Okay. So therefore, if you believe that way, then it's an issa deraisa of bal yirah, bal yamatzah, only chametz on Pesach.
Right,
whereas making chasana during sfira is just a minig of avelos, right, which is Avelos is a drabanan. This is a minig of Avelos, and there are many paiskim who say that if there could be a michshel al yidei ikuv hanesuin, the shvas Yaakov, and many say you should do it during Sfira. So the question is, if there's going to be 50 people by the wedding, and somebody may get sick and die from it, so to me that would seem to be easier to override than somebody who believes that the mechira is not really, is
not really. Everybody agrees that the mechira is valid. It's a chumrah to be machna like that. Nobody says it's invalid. Nobody says you're over bar yirah deraisa. It's not. It's a chumrah. You have to, and besides, there are ways of making the mechira valid according to everybody. There are ways of doing it. Maybe the way it's done today in a wholesale manner relies on some kulas which some mechmirim don't like. But there's a way. If people are really concerned about it, there's a way to sell your chametz. There are ways. You can actually pick it up, put it in the guy's domain. Make him have a mesirah. There are ways of doing it. Most people just don't care about it, and therefore either they rely on the majority view or they don't do it. But if a person is stuck and he wants it done l'chol hashitas, there are ways to be selling chametz. Selling chametz to a guy is not a new chiddush. The Gemara talks about that. You can sell chametz to a guy. It's just the way it's done today is somewhat of a shortcut, and that some people don't rely on. But you could find a way to do it. So I'm
saying, but nobody's realistically picking up all their chametz, finding a guy to keep it in the guy's garage. It's just.
But
not
if
really
this one person who never sold his chametz before is concerned about a food shortage, so then he'll buy some chametz. Well, it's not a big deal. Take a car, load it up, find a guy, put it in his house. It can be done. It's not out of the realm of.
But it's really not happening.
It's not happening because most people sell chametz. And the minority that don't are not worried that they're not going to find food after Yontiv.
But most people don't sell chametz. Most people don't sell chametz gomer. You sell pasta and bread.
Oh yeah, most people,
really?
Of course. Yeah, most people in the world, in the wide world, of course. It's a minority that don't.
I didn't know.
Yeshiva light, it's some Litvaks, it's a minority. Why not? If the Mishnah Berurah says you could do it, what do you have to be machmir more than the Mishnah Berurah for? It's not required upon you. Almost all poskim say you could do it. From the Chasam Sofer, almost all poskim say you could do it. It's a chumrah from the Gra. How many people do the chumras of the Gra?
It's just the people see it as a mirma, right?
But it's not. If you go through the halacha, you'll see that it's well documented. This is a minig Yisrael for the last 300 years. Everybody relies on it in some way or another because all the big food stores that you are buying chametz shavuot Pesach after Pesach are all sold their stuff.
Yeah, but Rabbi Neustadt, respectfully, there's a very big difference. When you're
I
buying,
understand, but we rely on it in some
chametz
sense.
shavuot Pesach is a drabanan. So on a suffix drabanan, we're saimach and mechaber. To be saimach and bal yirah, bal yimatzah.
Not a suffix.
Because of whatever on a whether it's ramoyas, yeah. But you could do it on a chametz shavuot Pesach, but on a deraisa bal yirah, bal yimatzah, a lot of people are machmir.
The real concern is not that it's a ramos. That's not the real issue. It's not a ramos because any Jew wants to generally sell his chametz. There's no ramos over here. The concern that the poskim have is that some of the kinyanim that take place maybe not be valid. It's technical stuff, and the technical stuff can be overridden. The ramos issue is not a thing. Any yid who declares that I don't want the chametz to be my rishus, you're not going to be able to rob on to the rasa anyway. It's no longer than bittul. So that's not the issue.
If somebody sold it and the mechira wasn't chal, he's ever bal yirah bal yimatzah because he didn't do bittul.
The mechira is chal. It's a technicality of.
I don't mean that, but if it wouldn't be chal, he would be ever bal yirah bal yimatzah, notwithstanding that he was mevatel chametz sheni yadua.
Right, but all poskim agree. The halacha. If you want to go with halacha, the halacha is that it works. That's it. We don't have to be machmir more than halacha. A person has a personal stringency that some people accept upon themselves. Fine, you can be machmir. That doesn't change the halacha. The halacha is that it's sold, and you're not every bal rabal matzah. Even go to the machmirim, you're not going to be every bal rabal matzah because that's the halacha. Can't argue with the halacha. You can be machmir, but you can't argue. Those are two different things.
So here's a question. You have the saying now. Let's say they're putting 50 people, more than 50 people. I think President Trump said more than 10 shouldn't get that. There shouldn't be more than 50. You're in a community. And somebody told me, I don't want to mention which community, someplace in Brooklyn where there was a Kassirer with literally hundreds of people a few nights ago. And, there's going to be a big Kassirer tonight. Should you pick up the phone and call the police?
Should you pick up the phone and call the police and tell them that there's a big Kassirer taking place?
Yeah.
Are you? What is your concern? Are you a member of that Kassirer party, or are you just a private citizen?
You're a private citizen, and you say that, just a private citizen.
I'm not sure that you have the obligation to get involved into that.
Let me ask you a question, Rabbi Neustadt. If you see somebody driving crazy down the street, do you have an obligation to pick up the phone, call the police, and say we have a crazy driver on our street?
But it's a little different. It's not the same.
I think this is much more dangerous. I think a car could kill one person. This could kill many, many people.
Yeah, potentially this can. But this person is going to kill him right now. It's going to be a direct hit. It's not going to be a grumma. It's not going to be a down the line issue. I don't disagree with you. I didn't say that he can't call the police. You asked me if he's obligated.
Would there be a mitzvah to call the police? Does the guy making the wedding, where he's inviting a few hundred people, is he a type of a rodeph of our community?
He's a type of a rodeph, yeah, I would say so. According to the medical
is he a meitzer harabim, where the Shulchan Aruch says it's a mitzvah to give him over?
Quite possibly. I would have him call his Roth first, though, but it's quite possibly that this is a dangerous situation. Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, this is the opinion of the medical. It's not. I don't care about the government law, but if that's the opinion of the medical community and they consider it to be a direct danger, so then, people need to do whatever they can to avoid direct danger.
Yeah.
I think it's legitimate. I certainly think that he's doing nothing wrong. I can't tell you, I'm not sure if he's obligated to do it, but it certainly is nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Rabbi Neustadt, I have an idea, and I'd like to have your either haskama, thumbs up, or thumbs down, okay? I haven't been davening with a minyan now for a few days because of self-imposed quarantine, right?
Okay.
Which I hold halachically may be required, but that's whatever the case may be. That's not the question. There are thousands and thousands of other Yid in the same way. And if you go to Minyan a few times a day, it creates a tremendous void. And on top of that, Klal Yisrael, Kol Yaakov, what do we do be'ez tzara? We daven, right? And the difference of a tefillah b'tzibur and tefillah yachid is substantial, right? Tefillah b'tzibur and chazeres reikam. So I want to suggest to do the following. There are some minyanim in America that are still going on. I don't know how many, but certainly some. And some are being done in a responsible way, where they're doing them, with people at space 10 feet, etc. So I want to put up a live video feed, right, on a YouTube channel, where there's a 6 o'clock minyan, a 7 o'clock minyan, an 8 o'clock minyan, 9 o'clock is a minyan, mincha gedola, there's a 6 o'clock minyan, there's a 7, and there's a ma'ariv, 2 and 3 ma'ariv. And whoever wants can dial in and answer a Mein Yehei Shmei Rabbah and do Kedusha, even though it's Ein Basara. And what would I be basing it on? That even though to make a chalais of a minyan, you need 10 people together, but to be mitzvah for a minyan, you could be outside the building, you could be down the block. So the internet, just like Rabbi writes, he used to be called Rav Shishkal or Rav Hankins Rebbitzin, one of the two, I don't remember. Motzei Shabbos for Havdalah. And there's a Minchas Elazar that says you can hear Kriyas Megillah over the phone, and this way allow thousands of people to daven b'tzibur by calling in to an active minyan. Would you think that's a good idea, or would you say that the downside of this is that, God willing, when this one day goes away, it'll be a way for people not to daven with a minyan at that point? What would be your opinion?
No, the downside is that it doesn't work halachically. The way we paskin, because the vast majority of the paskin is that any voice heard through technological amplifying is not considered the voice of the speaker, and it does not have any semblance to tefillah b'tzibur whatsoever. So it doesn't make a difference, even though you could hear the voice.
We have a raya from multiple Rishonim that it does.
No, I know Rishonim would discuss this because the Rishonim didn't have this kind of technology.
So
the Halacha L'maisa is 100% like that, even though there are some minority views who did not understand how microphones work and how technology works, and therefore and there are some views, but the standard halacha, the way it's accepted today in Klal Yisrael, is that you cannot be yotzei Abdullah on the phone, and you cannot hear the Megillah over the telephone, and you cannot join tefillah b'tzibur over video. So that's the bad idea. So
I have a raya that you can.
Alexandria?
No, over there, because there was a minyan over there, but it wasn't being transmitted by an artificial way. It's just you're standing. The Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, I think it's on Daf Chavdalad. My memory is slipping.
Right.
The Gemara says that if you see the levana as a reflection in the water, right, the Eidim can't say Eidus. And the Pirush on the Rambam, as well as Rabbeinu Chanan, will say, because you're probably seeing something, you may be deluding yourself that it's there. It looks like a thing. You can't say that I know it's there. But the fact that you're seeing it through a secondary source is not problematic. The only problem is that you could be imagining it. And these are two Rishonim, Halchu B'Kivan Echad. Nobody argues on them. Now, I don't see a difference between seeing a reflection off a river or off a puddle than a reflection off an electronic line. To me, it's the same thing.
Okay. It's a big difference. But it's not the same.
And being that we have, and I could mention three. So we have the Orchos Mishpat, says you could listen on the phone. You have a Minchas Elazar.
Orchos Mishpat? Who's that?
That's Rav Kook.
Okay.
You have the tshuva from Reb Moshe.
Right? Reb Moshe doesn't say that either. Reb Moshe says he's misupik on the subject.
Okay. But he did it lamaisa. He did it lamaisa.
That doesn't say in the tshuva.
No, but you ask his Einikel. He used to call Rav Hankins or Rav Shishkal's Rebbitzin on Motzei Shabbos. That's what I heard from his grandchildren.
I know that. Reb Moshe held like this. It's a Safek Ladina. He wasn't sure. And therefore, you said when you have no other choice and you need to be yotzei mitzvah like havdalah, and otherwise you can't start the week, you can't eat. So then it's better than nothing.
So my question is, would you say the same thing here?
And he was mitzvah the fact that the machlekes was showing whether women are chayiv and havdalah in the first place. So he held it was a sveka.
And I have, by the way, and I also have the Munkacha who says you could listen to the Megillah over the phone.
Right, but we don't pass like that, and he clearly was not...
Okay, because we don't pass him, because we don't want to open a slippery door.
No, we don't pass him that vada. He was not aware, he did not understand how these... When these microphone systems came out 70, 80, 90 years ago, they weren't well understood. They did not understand exactly how it works. But now we do. Since Rosh Zalman Auerbach researched it and went through the whole parsha, and he decided in unequivocal terms that it doesn't work, that's become the accepted halacha. Now, we still do rely on shasat chak situations when there is no other choice. If somebody would be stuck at home and he can't hear the Megillah in any way, it's better than nothing. Okay, it's better than nothing, but you can't do that with chatchila. You can't rely on that.
Let me ask you, Rabbi Neustadt, when you masad the kiddushin, right, use a microphone.
Yeah, but that's because 10 people are there that could hear you without the microphone. And if you don't have that, then you have a problem. You don't need to have, like we said before, you don't need 400 people by a wedding.
So, Rabbi Neustadt, would you allow somebody who is, let's say, has a hearing aid to be Oilel L'Torah now?
To be Oilel L'Torah, yeah, because what's the difference?
The only reason they're able to be mashmiel to their ear, right, is through the hearing aid. Without it, they would have a din of a cheresh. So would you say that somebody without a hearing aid, without a hearing aid, would be able to be able to be mitzvah?
You don't have a din of a cheresh if you lose your hearing. It's only if you're born that way, and it's only if you're cheresh and any medaber. It's altogether different.
The Prichadosh says somebody who can't hear.
I tell anybody by shul that if they have a hearing aid, they should take it out before they listen to Megillah. As long as they can hear without it, go close to the Bal Kaira and listen. Same thing with Shofar, same thing with Megillah, same thing with Kiddush. That's the standard instructions. If you can hear without it by listening really closely, take out your hearing aid.
So would you think that in this case, the B'diavad is different than Ramesh's case of
sure, over here not being yotzei mitzvah, but they were talking about you have a mitzvah to be yotzei Havdalah or Megillah or Shofar.
Okay.
So then there's no mitzvah here to that you need to be yotzei.
There's no mitzvah, but I could be a mitzvah to a minyan and hey, Minyan Heshmei Rabbah.
It's a nice emotional thing, but halachically it's not something that we do. We do that when we have no other choice, only so that on the tzad that it works, so that person has a backup. But if you don't need to do it, you don't do it.
But we use it for the tzad that it works. So what's the downside of using it here on the tzad that it works?
I don't say it's a downside. I mean, it's nothing because if it's not necessary, we don't do das yachid in order to do a hidur mitzvah. There's no chiv upon us to do it. See, if a person is found somewhere if he finds himself in New Mexico and he has no minyan, so we're going to make a new halacha. You have to get a video conference. So you should join a minyan somewhere. That's the halacha doesn't require that.
Yeah.
We don't look for new things. Let's try to mekayim the halachas that we have.
Okay. Now, the Gemara says, Ein Purani is bal la'olam ela b'shvil Yisrael.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to, as a Rav of a big Kehillah, a big Miyuchis, big Rav in Klal Yisrael, you would say that Ein Purani, what's the message here that we should be taking away from this?
Well, the message is obviously that the Rebbe Shalom wants to wake up Klal Yisrael to we don't know exactly what he wants to wake us up to. We don't have Nevi'im, and we can't take a guess. And when anybody does, it's really, that's not a responsible thing because we can't know exactly. But we do know that every tzara is a call for tshuva. Every tzara is a reminder that the Rebbe Shalom is out there, and we sometimes forget that he's out there, and he unfortunately reminds us every once in a while about it. And this is a reminder that whatever we think, all our wealth and all our technology and all our success is nothing, because in a minute he takes it all away, as he's showing us over and over again. And that's the real message, that Einad Milvado, he controls the whole world. So the message, of course, is for Klal Yisrael to hear. But at this time, the Rabbi Shalom decided to let the whole world hear it. He's hoping, of course, that we will pick up on it. But it's so loud and clear. If it would have been a smaller catastrophe, then people tend to, it's this, it's that. This is like worldwide. This is undeniable. clearly out there a message, and Mitzvah Hashem, we should internalize that message, and that would be the biggest Yeshua.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Neustadt. It's an honor to have you on with us.
Thank you.
Cool.
Have a good day.
Joining us from Lakewood, New Jersey, the Ir HaTorah, Lakewood, New Jersey, is Dr. Rabbi Doniel Roth. He's an associate clinical professor at Robert Wood Johnson. He's, I believe, Lakewood's only graduate of Yale Medical School. I could be wrong. That's a stretch on my part. He, in Lakewood, reads the Medical Halacha Symposium, which is both Rabbanim and physicians. He's a chaver of the Beis Havad in Halacha of Lakewood. Welcome, Rabbi Dr. Roth.
Thank you so much.
So, Rabbi Roth, can you give us as just a snapshot what's going on in Lakewood? Because just like what's going, you're on the ground, you're in the trenches. What's going on?
So until very recently, a few days ago, there was a relative ignorance of the situation, even though it was approaching us quickly as it moved from China to Europe to the United States. Physicians and infectious disease specialists recognize that this is just a matter of time and it's coming. And we got together to try and understand it better, to meet with infectious disease experts, to try and develop principles. There was a little bit of a delay because the Rabbanim, who really I love and admire, had a very hard time limiting Torah and Tefillah and schools into Nekesh Beis Rabbim, which is understandable. Because of that, there was a difficulty getting consensus, and people were confused what to do, and most people carried on business as usual till probably the last couple of days. I put out a post a couple of days ago saying that we really have to take this seriously and limit our social contact for, very strictly, because it's absolutely important to both flatten the curve and not have too many cases overwhelming the medical system where there won't be enough resources, ventilators, ICU beds, and doctors to care for the people, as well as hopefully diminishing the number of cases and the exposure from person to person, so that ultimately there will actually be fewer people getting this coronavirus altogether. Even though the younger population, especially the very young population, even though they can get quite sick, their mortality rate is almost nil. They are important hosts and carriers. So on the ground, it was a little strange where you'd have some people avoiding social contact and other people going to chasnas and hugging and kissing and sweating. There, finally, I was involved in meeting with Rabbanim, multiple meetings with infectious disease specialists and Rabbanim on Zoom meetings. Baruch Hashem, we came to a Kol Kaireh, which I pushed it to be more restricting with regard to Minyanim and shuls. They came up with guidelines, very strict guidelines, which probably would work if people adhere to them strictly, where it means that they're more than 6 feet apart. They come in, they come out, they don't touch surfaces, they don't touch each other, they wash their hands as soon as they walk in. This is not transmitted in the air of the room, really. It is transmitted by breathing and being close to each other in respiratory droplets. So if you keep your distance and you don't touch anything anybody else touched, then you're not mingling everybody together. However, technically and practically, that becomes very difficult to adhere to, and I think it probably is safest for people, I do believe it's safest for people to stay home, not to go to shul. Schools have now been closed. I hope daycares are closed, but I hear some are still open. I think it's a mistake. Agreed, there are Yechidim, a pediatrician, said that the pediatric population is not at risk, and therefore it's okay to go to a playgroup, but that doesn't make sense because they are vectors for this disease, and it is very important for people to keep their social contacts separate. But that doesn't just mean not being together. It means that they have to be aware that their hands are the most active vehicles of contamination and vector transmission. Yodim askoni esheim. You touch your nose, you touch a surface. The virus is on the surface. It can last at least 24 hours, possibly even several days. Somebody else touches that chair or that table or that sefer. Now they've got it. Then they wipe their nose. They're now maybe infected. Maybe it's a small inoculum. Maybe it'll take longer for them to get, the disease, or maybe they'll even be asymptomatic if they're young and healthy, or maybe there are some cases that will go through this asymptomatic. And lucky them, they'll be immune. But during that period of time that they are having high viral load, they are easily able to transmit it to others, and that's a real sakanach shash for the community. If people stay home, they are involved in hatzalas nefashos mamish.
Let me just say, I have a flyer here. Eist Sarahi Liyaakov, Yom Tfilavis Iris, Yom Aleph, to gather in all the yeshivas and divrei yisairis with Tehillim, b'chol batei medrash al yeshiva. I assume that that's a thing of the past.
That is absolutely a thing of the past. All
and
the
as well as there was a big hachlasa sefer Torah. It's like I had the strangest thing. People call me. There's a big hachlasa sefer Torah in Lakewood. At the same time, I had a Rav in Lakewood. A Rav from Teaneck asked me if I could put together mechaber for him as who gets a ventilator first. And I'm getting these questions. Could you put together? And it just reminded me of the Gemara in Gittin, where the Gemara says, I think it's off Daf Nun Zayin, that in Turmalka there was one side during the Churban, on one side they were butchering people, on the other side they were still partying. And I was just thinking that, Lakewood and Teaneck, they're both in New Jersey. They're not so far away from
agree.
each other,
That's unfortunately a fair analogy. People were confused. I was communicating with multiple Rabbanim. Many of them were about to close their shuls, and finally we met, and there were a group of doctors and Rabbanim who were able to come to consensus, at least some level of consensus that was which was adequate, that basically shut down all the public activities and put severe, strict limitations on any minyanim that occur. Again, I want to say for the record, I think that there should not be minyanim. It's a mistake. People will not be able to function in those settings in a way that doctors know how to maintain sterility as if they are in the operating room. It's something we're trained in. We take a medical student and the nurse is watching him or her like a hawk, because they invariably are going to touch something they're not supposed to because they're only medical students. It takes training to know how to watch your hands from going where they shouldn't be going and contaminating surfaces and then touching a sterile field or whatever it is. It's different, but it's kind of a similar concept. And therefore, I think the safer thing is for people not to go to minyanim.
Okay. So question for you. First of all, we just had on a Rav from Flatbush who said, listen, 50% of the people who will die will just die of fear. They will not die of corona. It's because of the panic that everybody's sowing. So he quoted some study that says that there's a fear, people die of fear. So he said it's a fear factor that's killing people, 50%. And then he says this when the CD says that the fatality rate, depending on your locale, is between 0.5% to 5% or 6%. He says those numbers are absurd because they're not taking into account the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who have it, who don't know about it, and are asymptomatic. So really, it's less than 1 in 1,000 who are susceptible to die from this. How would you respond to that?
The response is we don't know. It clearly seems that it's not that low. If you look at closed cases, because those are people who have already died or gotten better, because the people who get it and confirm the curve of those that actually conclude or die, then we're on an exponential rise, and it's doubling every few days. So we're up to around 200,000 cases globally. It's going to go to 1 million within a not so long period of time. So if you look at closed cases, the rate of death is higher than 2.5 or 2.6%. If you look at all cases, it's around that. It is probably lower than the 2.6% or so that we see because there are many undiagnosed cases, untested cases, and even asymptomatic cases, but it's definitely not in the 1 in 1,000 range. It's we don't know, but it's probably somewhere in the 1 to 2% range of mortality.
Which would be 10 to 20 in 1,000.
Correct. Now, the reality is that, mortality means you're gone, you're dead. And this is all comers, so it's important to understand that the mortality rate for a young person under 40, even though it does affect younger people too, the mortality rate's very low, probably, like you're saying, probably less than 1 in 1,000. However, the mortality rate for an 80-year-old, especially if they have comorbid conditions like heart disease or lung problems or Parkinson's or diabetes, is much higher. It's in the 15+% range. 15, that means that 1 or 2 out of 10 will die. And that's really real. And if people are communicating it and interacting with them, then that cohort, if you look at them alone, they're really at high risk, and that's a terrible avla to expose them and to bring them down. We care about our elderly too. It's a bracha that it's not wiping out our children, and that's a chesed. But the mortality rate is much higher in the elderly population.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So if you have a community, let's take a community that has 100,000 people. Just pick a nice round number. And I don't know, the CDC thinks that at some point 30% of the people will have it, which is a very frightening. I mean, it's 30,000 people. Now, your average community of 100,000 people will have a hospital. That hospital will have, 12, 10, 20 ICU beds, right? We'll have 2, 3, 4 ventilators, right? Now, what happens? Now you have 30,000 people would have it. Out of the 30,000 people, 10% will go into critical care. That's according to the CDC, which means you may need 5,000 ventilators, and you have 10 or 5. What do? Let's say you have 5 people, 10 people need a ventilator. You have 1. What's halachic? So what do you do? Who lives? And which one lives, and how many die? And how do you choose it?
Unfortunately, this is a real question. They're dealing with it in Italy, and we may have to deal with it, and probably will have to deal with it in the United States. Even if every ICU has a ventilator, even if they start building more of them, even if they get other companies to start building them, there will be a shortage. So the reality is we have hadracha from the Paiskim about this. When 2 patients come in and they're coming at the same time, we give the ventilator to the sicker patient who needs it the most. If one patient can wait and the other one will die sooner, we give it to the one who's likely to die without it. If they're both the same level of illness, and one is a chayesha, or less likely to survive, and the other has a higher chance of full recovery, it's a terrible decision to have to make. But the halacha dictates you give it to the one who has the better chance of full refuah. This is all based, or mostly based, on Rav Moshe's tshuvas on this, as well as there's some tshuvas from Rav Zilberstein and Untitled. Rav Moshe says that if someone's already hooked up, already dedicated to an emergency room bed or an ICU bed, even if he's only a chayesha, you can't take him out. It's also take him out. He's kind of makam, even if he's an ani, even if he didn't pay a penny for it, you can't take him out or remove it. For someone with you can't take him out to replace him with the chay olam or a higher recovery likelihood person. If there is a din kedima, and we have a mission Harius that tells us about kedima with ish kaim isha and kain kaim levi. We also have a concept that if somebody comes first, like we said, then he is zeichet to that ICU bed. He gets kedima, even if the first person was only chayesha with a lower chance of survival. The criteria, the Mishnah and Harius and the Gemara over there, are not so practical typically, because except if they have the exact same level of illness. Because if one's sicker, you give it to the sicker person. Furthermore, there's another factor. There's a concept of Ava. Ava is a term that can be used in 2 ways. And it's important to know this distinction when looking at the Paiskim. There's an Ava that is of limited heter, that will override Isurim D'Rabbanan, where it'll create sinah and tension and animosity among goyim. But then there's an Ava of Misa, where it will cause potential death to Jews. There, we apply the din of Ava, and if we start applying, a kohen should get it before, things like that, it would create tremendous Ava, and there would be an uproar from legislation, and there'd be, people are always looking to look at Eden as a scapegoat. So fortunately, it's not so relevant, because it's not up to the decision of Jewish doctors to make those kind of decisions. There's protocol, there's hospital principles, number one. And number two, if you're working, Zilberstein writes, if you're working for the hospital, you're an employee of the hospital, that's basically the case all the time. It's not a private practice. You're doing an emergency room or an ICU. Then there's no chiyuv kedima. There are triage principles of the hospital, and you're meshubah to the hospital to follow those principles. And that being the case, we follow the criteria which we said before, and basically you give it to the sicker patient. There's an interesting tshuva from Tzitz Eliezer, and Rav Zilberstein says the same thing, that this whole thing of kedima, of the criteria in the Mishnah, it really only applies if they come, if they're coming, one comes first, the other comes second. But if the doctor comes,
on the contrary, it's simultaneous.
On the contrary, I want to retract. The kedima of the person coming first, getting priority, is only when they're coming. The first person comes, the doctor's there waiting for them. The emergency room is waiting for them. They get kedima. But when the doctor they're all waiting, and the doctor comes to them later, they're waiting in the waiting room. then it's considered a b'vasachas, even if in the preceding time they showed up first. That's the main
What
point.
happens a younger person or an older person? What do you do?
So that's the same kind of concept. So if you have, it's a terrible decision, but technically, if they came the same time, it's not that the older person came first, and the mamash are at the exact same time, then one would have to make the terrible decision and give the rest of the ventilator to the younger person as a higher likelihood of survival. However, if they're both likely to survive and you don't have that knowledge and the younger one can wait a while, then the obligation would be to give it to the one who is more likely to die now if the other one can wait. If they're both critically ill and they both, according to their PO2s and their hypoxic levels, need the ventilator or they're going to die, then you give it to the younger person who's more likely to have a full recovery, which is an awful decision I hope that we don't have to make, but it's something ICU care physicians are going to have to make, and in other countries they already had to make.
Right. So basically, you give it to the one if they come simultaneously. Let me just make a sekum of who has if one comes first, he gets it, and once he gets it, you can't take him off it. Right. That all the poskim agree with. If they come simultaneously, you give it to the one who has the better chance of survival. Now, if they both have equal chances of survival, and one guy's 70 and one guy's 15, so one guy could live, I don't know, another 10 years or 20 years, the other guy could live another 60 years, what do you do then?
I think that it doesn't, according to what I understand from Moshe, once they have more than a year of survival ahead of them, their likelihood of survival is more than Chayishah. Their Cholim is usually defined at least 12 months of time. Then the fact that they're younger or older doesn't matter. Let's say you can even apply that to 15 and 40. But
right, Moshe, that's in Igros Moshe Chelik Beis Seminayin Hey. He says exactly what you just said. Yeah, but he also does say that if there's a better chance of living in Seminayin Gimel, he says you give it to the one who has a better chance of living. By the way, there is a Rabbi Yankiv Emden, an outlier opinion, like there always is, who says you give it to the younger person.
Interesting.
And the Biras Migdalais from Yankiv Emden, he brings that. It's scary how these halachas, which we never thought we would ever use.
Yes, unfortunately, these are decisions that usually we're only in the battlefield, and unfortunately, we're going to have to deal with it because we're literally in the midst of a battlefield. Yeah.
Now, just saying Kaddish, people who have to say Kaddish, it's terribly painful for them to miss the Minyan, isn't it? What do they do?
So it is painful, and if they're in a place that they shouldn't be going to Minyan, or especially if they're elderly and they absolutely should not be in a Minyan, even if it's not a place which is in lockdown or closed Minyanim, there's a concept of having a shlichus for Kaddish. And it's the Maggid Avrohom in Kuflan Bay says it's better to be soicher the person than he should do it bechinam, but there's definitely grounds for the concept of having a shlichus, preferably al yidei schiris, to say Kaddish. There is brought down from a Shabbos Chuz Binyam Zev, and it seems that way from a Tshuva in the Rivash. He's quoting the fact that Rabbi Kiva taught the son of someone to say Kaddish instead of saying it himself, that a shlichus doesn't help. But many others say that was the preferred thing for the son, and he taught him to say it, so he should say it, and there are other reasons. But al pidin, if one cannot say Kaddish, then a shliach can say Kaddish, and again, as the Maggid Avrohom says, it should be something that he pays schiris for. And this is brought down in the Achronim. Chlan Sefer, Neustadt, Yehudah, the Ben Ish Chai, the Chelkas Yaakov, Rav Shlomo Kluger, all quote the concept of being soicher somebody to say Kaddish. There is a question whether this only works b'oinus, where you can't do it, but this is definitely an oinus. If you can't go to Minyan, then this is clearly a situation of oinus.
Right. I have a very interesting question. It's something that I would like to see if we could put together, because it really fills a hole in my life. I can't say to others having a minyan. But I think it would be a real schus hatzibur, because there are minyanim that can be done outside. You keep 10 feet away. Where there are minyanim, many times a day, right? And a Skype is set up, and people could dial in and be mitzaref to the minyan via video hookup.
It's a beautiful concept, but I don't know if it works in terms of your mitzvah of Tzilah B'tzibur.
So the Archas Mishpat already says that it can. He says you could be yotzei day telephone, and there's Rav Moshe talks about being yotzei Havdalah by a phone. Yeah, so there's two different dinim that are going on here. One din is about can you create a minyan virtually, And the answer
Correct.
is, for sure you can't. The Shulchan Aruch says you can't. In other words, if 10 people stick
But
their heads out of different windows in a building, they can't create it. But once it's created, you could participate from anywhere, right? So it doesn't talk about virtually. It talks about from the distance. So we have halachic precedence that others will disagree with, clearly, but there is no, there are a few riots. I actually wrote a shtickle tire on it, which we'll put on our website. I wrote this years ago, and the country is called Internet Halacha. So certainly b'di'evet, I would say certainly you could be mitzdaref. So for all those for people who have that hole in their life and they want to say Amen Yesh Rabbi, and they want to say Baruch Hu, and they could be mitzdaref, even though you don't say Davish Kedusha b'pachs me'asara, but virtual there seems to be enough halacha, including actually there's a Minchas Elazar of all people writes about being mitzdaref to a minyan on a telephone. So there are enough to say it that b'di'evet you should be able to do it, and that's what it would be really. I think as chus hatzibur, somebody could set up something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, emotionally, it has tremendous benefit. I think the idea of having Zoom meetings or online get-togethers with families is also a good thing. So you don't have to go kick. The kids shouldn't kiss the bubby, but they should definitely. And even if they live in the same town and they're used to seeing each other, they can communicate that way. And getting back to Minyan, there's that emotional component, there's that spiritual elevation, there's the feeling of being connected to the tzibur through tefillah. You have Ramosha where the Amen Yesh Mirabas and the Kedusha most likely has an element of participation that's real and valid. And B'chlal, we have the concept that if you aren't able to go, you should daven at the same time that the tzibur is davening Shemoneh Esrei. So there you for sure have that benefit. It's a wonderful idea.
In Bria, every day it says Taiv, right?
Mm-hmm.
Only one time does it say Loi Taiv in all of creation. When is the Loi Taiv? Loi Taiv Hayaysa Adam Levadai. Isolation is the only time where it says, and which, by the way, in Aramaic, Taiv means the concept of agglomeration. Chativo Achas means one. So Klal Yisrael, more than anybody, understands the importance of tzibur, of one. So if we can create a virtual tzibur, in effect, we'd create a little bit of a kapara of one of the greatest, detriments to ruchnius that's ever been created. Certainly has to be the internet, but here's one area that maybe we could use it as a little bit of a tikkun. So let me ask you, what about Shiva? Can you be Mekayim Nichav Avelim through a telephone?
So, it's well known that sometimes people call, and the question is, if they can't get there, and whether they're actually being Mekayim Nichum Avelim. And Ramosha writes there are two aspects of Nichum Avelim. There's the element for the Avel, to be there and give him support. And then there's the aspect of the Tevis Hames himself, that to even if he doesn't have Avelim, to go to be there in his either in his house or at the place of the Kvura, and these two inyanim are both important inyanim of Nichum Avelim. The part for the Avel of being Menachem, and he writes, you for sure can do through the telephone, and the second element you can't. So l'chatchila you go to do both elements, but if you can't, you can't. And the Tshuvas Van Hoga says the same thing, that there's the Nichum Avelim for the Avel, and there's the Tikkun L'meis. So the part for the Nichum Avelim for the Avel, we can definitely do on the telephone, and we should always when it's hard to get somewhere, but definitely in this case when there's more of a likelihood that the Avel doesn't have Avelim, doesn't have Menachemim coming in person, we should double over our efforts to make the phone calls.
I just want to comment on what you said. The concept of Nichum Avelim, which the Gemara says somebody doesn't have Avelim by Shivin Asara, you take 10 people. Sadly, the one of the greatest people in the last hundreds of years was certainly the great Moshe Chachma, and he died without children. His daughter predeceased him. His daughter was married to Avrohom Luftbier. I was actually at his caver. It's in Warsaw, in the great Warsaw Cemetery. It wasn't destroyed by the Nazis. And they say over that when he was nifta, the Ragged Shava brought a minyan to his house to sit Shiva. The concept of there was no Avelim, but for the mace, Tovas HaMace. But I would say, Ramosha writes, he says he doesn't see how it's a covered mace via the telephone. And I would just share a story. I remember that in after 9/11, there was a fellow, I believe his name was Bigeleisen. He died, and they sat Shiva months later, when they found part of his DNA. And I remember reading, I think, one of the Jewish magazines, periodicals, that the Belzer Rebbe was a Belzer Chassid called up, and how the whole family congregated around the telephone as the Belzer Rebbe was menachem them. And I would just say, like, getting a call from a president, getting a call from a big Rebbe, from a leader, there is a big element of covet to that. So it could be,
sure.
I mean, is there a svara to say that if the vart is to the mace, if the mace is that, you see that his patir was respected, that a minyan come together to sit shiva, I mean, who's not to say that when the president calls to be menachem avel and everybody hears it, that's also not a covet l'mace?
Is it a cover for the mace or a cover for the oval?
I think for both. The mace sees that his passing, one of the reasons for saying Kaddish is there is a void. When a person is nifta, it says in by all the Mekubalim, the Ben Ish Chai brings it, that the person has left a vacuum. And when somebody says Kaddish, we're saying that Kedusha that you brought to the world, we are supplementing with the Kaddish we say. So that presence that this nifta had in the world, maybe when they get a call, I mean, I'm just saying there is some element of kavod l'mace in that too. If the mace's presence is there, I'm just throwing out a svara. I don't have a riot to it, just a hargusha.
It's a good svara. I mean, we have Ramosha, so we're saying on Ramosha, we definitely have the element of the benefit for the Avelim, so it's that much we definitely have. But I hear this one.
Should mikvahs be kept open for men and for women? I mean, if you want to talk about this, it's like there is, somebody told me that, in Williamsburg, Crown Heights, the mikvahs are packed, and if people understood that, they go to the mikvah and they could die. It's astonishing. If there was cancer, if somebody said, if you go to this in this mikvah, there's a 4% chance you're going to end up with lung cancer, would they go? I'm just, as a physician, should mikvahs be left open?
I think it's obvious that if there was a risk that they would die, they would not go to the mikvah. The good news is that mikvahs are chlorinated. So going into the water of the mikvah is not the concern, right? The big concern is the contact when you're there.
I mean, if somebody sneezes, if somebody is asymptomatic and they sneeze in a confined area, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many people could that contaminate? How many people could breathe in a droplet or touch a surface?
So it depends, right? if there are people in the room, for sure not. Let me clarify. To go to the mikvah with other men and people in the room, a whole group of people, terrible. Absolutely not. That's the worst thing you could do, because if you do that, then you're exposing other people, and it's like going to Minyan or worse. And they're all moving around. If there's definitely if they're not keeping the social distancing and they're not coming and washing their hands in before they go in. What they could do if people wanted to set it up is individuals can have appointments, go to the mikvah, they come in, they wash their hands, they go to the mikvah. Now once they go to the mikvah, their body is actually less likely to spread the virus if they then don't touch their face, and then they leave. And the next person comes, the same thing. Ideally, you may disinfect between, but that is something you can definitely do. The water of the mikvah that has all this body exposure, it kills the virus because of the chlorination of the water, so that's good. But it's the contact of people around it. So for women, I think it's perfectly just appropriate for them to set up appointments where people, anyway, it's done this way, where women don't see each other, and there's careful contact between the woman, the shemeres, and the person going to the mikvah, and then they know how to avoid, they clean off the surfaces or whatever it is after they leave, and then another person comes. For men, they would have to do the same thing by appointments or separate people one at a time, as opposed to having the mikvah open for men to go all the time. I think they just have to treat it in the way where the contact with surfaces is dealt with as a problem and eliminate the contaminants, but the water itself is not a problem.
How should Rabbanim be checking maaros in this period?
So the good thing is that's also true. Maaros, which have obviously potential blood products and bodily secretions on it, is not a method of transmission. That doesn't mean that there's never been viral particles detected, but in a way that it just doesn't transmit. So a Roth can look at a mara and not worry about getting coronavirus or being exposed. If he wants to be extra careful, he can wash his hands after checking a mara, but that's about all he'd have to do.
What about the pet? What about the pet during the pandemic?
So same thing. The pizza b'peh itself not a problem, because the infant's blood, even if somehow is exposed already at such a young age, it's not a method of transmission. The bigger concern is if the sandik is breathing on top of the moil, that's a method of transmission. But the mitzvah v'peh issue should not be a problem at all.
So what do we do with a sandik? Should a sandik have to wear a mask?
So I was just going to say, ideally,
and should the moil have to wear a mask? Well, he can't. He has to do mitzvah v'peh.
Right. So the moil probably doesn't have to. The main thing is that if he's the exposed person, I mean, hopefully he's been careful and he's not, socially mingling with lots of people. But even so, the baby is definitely not going to be mingling with people. Even if somehow, some way, the moil exposed the baby is unlikely to be at risk in any way. And again, we're talking about remote issues. I think it's perfectly justified and preferred for the sandik to wear a mask, because the moil may be a method of transmission to the sandik, and then the moil does his thing and doesn't get close to other people. Clearly, there shouldn't be hugging and kissing between the father and the sandik and the moil and this, but as long as they keep social distancing, it's impossible to keep social distancing between the moil and the sandik. So if the sandik wears a mask and the moil does not wear a mask, it probably should be okay.
Now, should we have a minyan by the bris?
So that's a controversial topic. Some people are very makbid that there should be a minyan in the bris, but mikra din, there's no requirement. So ideally, there should be father, mother, moil, and sandik. The father can even be the sandik.
Now, let me ask you another question. There's a doctor in my community, actually a doctor I use. He made a wedding last week, and he said they were mevatel all the sheva brachas in. Should we be mevatel sheva brachas in?
If you have 10 people living in a house together, I mean, you're not going to have panim chadoshes. There's no chi of sheva brachas. I think they should be mevatel sheva brachas. How are you going to have a sheva brachas without having exposure to lots of people? At least at this time in our period of the disease, we should not have sheva brachas. There's no chi of sheva brachas. If you have sheva brachas, it's mar b'simcha, wonderful thing. Maybe they should have one big sheva brachas type of party without it being sheva brachas when this whole thing passes, where you have like a celebration, especially if the chasna was small, which it should be, or minimal, like just a minyan of people. But I don't see the justification for sheva brachas in this current unfortunate situation.
Now, what about the New York Times had an article yesterday where it wouldn't.
Oh, and by the way, there's no chiyuv for shalom zachars or vortzer l'chayim. That's there's a mitzvah to do a pidyon ben, a bris bisman, a chasana so the couple can get married. Those things should be done in b'derech mitzumtzum and limited ways with precautions. But all those other extra parties should be held off.
Who should we be listening to, rabbis or doctors? I don't like that question, but I'm just repeating a question that somebody asked me, because I don't see the contradiction there. I think that for the most part, a Rav who's a Talmud Chacham works with doctors, like the Shulchan Aruch says in Hilchos Yom Kippur, right? But somebody asked this question, so I'm going to repeat it.
I'm going to rephrase the question with you.
Good.
I'm going to rephrase the question with your permission. In terms of where do we put our credibility in terms of these matters, perhaps clearly. In halacha, throughout the ages, doctors don't claim, Rabbanim never claimed to be medical experts unless they happen to be. And in Shulchan Aruch Yom Kippur, Rabbanim consult with medical professionals to understand what the level of sakana is, and they take that information and they paskin. So clearly in this situation, I think the Rabbanim do that, and I'm sure that's the appropriate method, and that's the way it should be done. It's not about listening to the rabbi versus listening to the doctors. The discussion about the medical information and what should be done to prevent sakana is really up to the doctors who have that knowledge and information to transmit. And then it's for the Rabbanim to make the psak on how we conduct ourselves, knowing what the level of sakana is. Now, let's say a doctor decides, for whatever reason, that he feels that a 1 in a million risk of sakana should make people do A, B, or C. And in halacha, we don't recognize that. It's a situation where you don't uproot life for that. We have situations where a person would be allowed, let's say a doctor says, you cannot be, I prohibit you from being a certain profession because there's some level of risk, and Halacha says you're allowed to do it because parnasai we allow it. It's meforsh in Shulchan Aruch. So we don't listen to the doctor. The Rav tells us, right? Exactly. So we trust the guidance of our Rabbanim about how to live life, but the Rabbanim can't ignore the medical data and say, what do they know? We don't know. And I think it's really important for them to move quickly when there's something like this, to come together or to come as an individual who's a leader and come with a psak and guide people and give them directive early on to spare people from suffering and possibly even death. So clearly we listen to the Rabbanim to lead our lives, but they must work together. And in Lakewood, we worked very hard to do that. And I think we've been successful now to bring the physicians and the Rabbanim together to be to understand the gravity of the situation.
Rabbi Dr. Roth, thank you very much for your time. We should hit Besuras Tovus.
Amen. Besuras Tovus. Klal Yisrael should have a Yeshua from this terrible machla. Matzlacha with everything.
Bye-bye.
Joining us from Lakewood, New Jersey, is Rabbi Yehudah Kassirer, who really has boots on the ground. He's the director of the Bikkur Cholim of Lakewood. He's also the director of all friendship houses. He has Sloan, Cornell, Special Surgery, Jersey Shore, Lakewood, Cleveland, Mayo Clinic. So you're really in touch with what's going on. Welcome, Rabbi Yehudah.
Welcome, Reb David. First of all, how are you feeling?
Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. Okay. So
what's going, is this affecting our community? There's only in the United States now, I don't know, it's so many thousands. But money is Is it affecting our community? How is it affecting our community? If it is, what are the numbers and how should we?
Yes, absolutely. I heard the question. So the answer is, and we all have access to a lot of this information. We're really hoping that the information that we're seeing on the reputable websites are accurate. And as we're speaking, United States is certainly, halfway or lower down on the list, and it's a tremendously large country. To be the numbers that I'm looking at right now, pretty much a little over 7,500 people have it. So far we had a total of 100. I think we're just hitting 117 cases of unfortunately deaths. And the other scary thing, which is important for us, is that if you look at some of the other map radars, New York, New Jersey, Washington State are some real hotspots. Some of the news outlets were Al Tiftach Pes Sutton calling Brooklyn a potential ground zero, which is something which is not to put anybody in panic. We're all doing our best to get through this, but it's really something which is extremely, extremely concerning on many ends.
Tell us what's happening. I mean, you're always the person they go to, Bikkur Cholim, when there's people in the hospital. Are there from the people in the hospital?
So currently in the Lakewood Immediate Hospital, we only have 7 or 8 people which are hospitalized as we're speaking. So far, none of their tests have come back positive. There is a true issue with it because they haven't really been testing properly until Monday. The hospitals had many, many different conflicting guidelines, and they were really holding off. They said this one's critical anyhow. This one's not doing well anyhow. It's pretty much a positive. So if the question is if it hit Lakewood, unfortunately it hit Lakewood. There's no question about it.
What about Brooklyn, Muncie? What are you saying?
So the reports that I've heard out of Crown Heights, is that there's unfortunately 10 from people from the Crown Heights community on respirators as we're speaking right now. That's a staggering number, to what's going on. That's not just if everybody remembers, a short week and a half ago, everyone was just saying, oh, this is just a bad flu. It's a different strain of the flu. Kids do get it. Kids don't get it. Adults get it. Don't get it. And literally, unfortunately, as this is progressing day by day, I don't know if the numbers are getting better, but the like you're saying, the boots on the ground we're seeing in front of us, there's a tremendous hospital network which is at tremendous risk. If in the event that most hospitals from a business perspective, especially over the past 5 years, have really backed out of in-house. They backed out of in-house patients. They do in the good old days there were patients that were in hospitals for a couple of weeks at a time, and now everything is based on trying to do it home health, and right after surgery, as long as the person can walk and they're doing well, they send them out. Even from a billing end, they're just doing everything to keep patients out of the hospitals. And our hospitals in the past 10 years, besides a handful of hospitals, haven't expanded as Kanai Nahara, the general population grew, and as Kanai Nahara, the Yiddishu population grew. We did not really match up to those numbers where, especially over here, Lakewood by no doubt has doubled in the past 10 years, and there's not much that has been doubled in regard to any of the beds in the hospital over here, which is a separate conversation for itself.
I've heard that there are 100 cases in Borough Park. Have you heard anything like that?
I've certainly seen that. I've heard many of the voice notes from reputable Hatzalah members, from reputable doctors, and other community members begging and pleading. And this is what we've been hearing throughout, is to blunt the curve. Keep people home, keep people out of popular places, keep people, really to hunker down. And it's not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy for families to do it. It's not easy for businesses to do it. I can tell you on the response end, we're really, everyone's, you're never well enough prepared, or some of the conversations I had this morning in a hospital was conversations I never thought I would have in my life. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with right now where hospitals are trying to figure out how many ICU beds will they have? How many respirators do we have? We're trying to pull respirators literally from across the country to purchase them, to rent them, whatever we can do to get our hands on it. We'll take whatever they have, be it old models, new models. It's not an unthought of number that even if hospitals that have a capacity, they will not be able to go more than double their capacity. And we as a community, David, and you've seen it in the Friendship House, and it's not shaykh. Anybody that ever sees any, the hundreds of people that go through our rooms and our stay by Sloan Kettering, stay at other facilities where we take care of these people. Klal Yisrael has done an amazing job the past years with our friendship houses and Bikkur Cholim, Hatzalas. We have chaverim, we have misaskin. We have so many beautiful services which a community has, but no one in their wildest dream would have ever thought that we would be dealing with a situation like this, where we're trying to find a surplus of respirators.
That's my question. Klal Yisrael is mechuka mikol ha'amim, right?
Correct.
And the prat that goes in the Torah, ki chachmaschem ubinaschem, and the Shulchan Aruch brings a psak almost 1,000 years old, and the Gemara talks about it, that a dever bal'ir, a gefa bal'ir, leave the city. So we are the first ones, when we talk about self-quarantine, the United States is signed on the CDC. Countries of the world that aren't zeicha to have a CDC, such a robust health system of researchers, use the WHO, the World Health Organization. Gemara, 1,700 years ago, 1,600 years ago, and the Shulchan Aruch, the Maril, 1,300s, right? Dever bal'ir, quarantine yourself. So why is it that we are not only mechuka mikol ha'amim, but we also have a halachic and a bavli and a Shulchan Aruch that says self-quarantine as soon as why do we find the masses acting so stupidly? Why was there a wedding 2 nights ago in Brooklyn that had 800 people there? Besides the common sense of it, what about the fact that we have a Kabbalah on this?
So the answer is certainly there's no question about it. It's a tough question. The limut zchus that I can say is that unfortunately, for whatever reason or another, people froze and went into a total denial about what was going on. No one ever thought, I had this conversation with a doctor 6 weeks ago, and I said, do you think this ever will hit American shores? And he's like, nah, maybe we'll have a case or two, and there'll be some research. There was a tremendous amount of denial that many of the Rabbanim, unfortunately had. We really, need to be careful when I speak about Rabbanim, but we need to realized that there was a tremendous amount of denial over here of what was really happening, which is really, really terrible. Because if you're following what happened in Crown Heights, and not Chasam to call out one community over another, was that unfortunately it hit there before Purim. And Purim was literally a percolator of it. Purim exasperated it. Lakewood, there are some people that are running around and, that are still saying, oh, wow, Baruch Hashem, there's no confirmed cases in Lakewood. I mean, how foolish do these people need to be? They can look up the text messages. My son took my phone last night and counted 450 phone calls that came into my private cell phone, aside to our hotline, which we've been manning 24/7, of true questions. Yes, half of them are just like basic information questions. Do you know this? Do you know that? There's true medical questions that are going on right now. We have patients. There's many hospitals that are not doing surgeries right now. We have patients. I spoke to a cancer patient, waited for a pulmonologist for 3 months. Today is the day that person's supposed to see the pulmonologist. Boom. All those appointments are canceled. The havoc that's going on, aside to the actual epidemic, is the residuals, which are horrendous. But to answer your question, I believe there was a certain amount of denial that was in place because I could there were a couple of doctors, myself, and a couple of others that have worked on it for 72 hours straight to get the proper guidelines out there, and what we've witnessed was a tremendous amount of denial, unfortunately.
Well, Rabbi Yehudah, is there anything else you want to add?
Is there anything else I want to add? I want to add is as follows. We're maminim b'nei maminim. We know that this is a time which, I've asked people a lot smarter than me, a lot older than me, have been in this field. It's something we've never seen. Halavai, we should be right that this is Ikvus and Mashiach and this is the last blow. But until then, going back to what you said, we have a Shulchan Aruch, the same way we asked every Karas Shiloh. And before I get into a car on Shabbos on an emergency, we have a guideline from Rabbanim. And before we pick up a phone on Shabbos, Rabbi said we have thousands of Fruma doctors. We're gebenched in the tri-state area from the Fruma community of doctors that we've relied on them for, at least from the war, at least for the past 75, 80 years. We relied on them. Eichlim b'Yom Kippur, not Eichlim b'Yom Kippur. Take them into the hospital, don't take them into the hospital. We have a responsibility to listen to these doctors. Their Shulchan Aruch tells us to follow their instructions, and whatever the instruction is, we can't play around with it.
Yeah. And by the way, let me read the Shulchan Aruch. He brings from there's a Ramah in Kuf Tezayins of Cotton Hay in Yeridea. Yesh levreich min ha'ir kishadever be'ir. Now here he says, the yesh lotes betchilat hadever, when it starts, not after there's already a lot of death. Eloi b'sayfei. Right? And v'aser lismoich anes. You should not be soymach on anes. Right? Etc. Dr. Rabbi Kivega, in the Haggayis over there, Kishamidas hadin metucha einay mavchin bein tzaddik l'rasha. Could be the biggest tzaddik. He could be davening in Minyan 100 times. When the midas hadin is metucha einay mavchin bein tzaddik l'rasha, so quarantined, Shulchan Aruch, the minute you hear about it. Don't wait for the sci-fi.
Absolutely.
Over from the Shaimri Amunim or from some Chassidish Rebbe or from a Baal Musa. This is the Ramah in Kufta Zayin.
100%. And this is the Ramah that we've been saimach on every halacha shayla we've done for the past hundreds of years. And that's my message. My message is to the Olam to take care of each other, take care of the people out there. Just because you can't visit your elderly parents or your elderly grandparents, make sure there's a way that they're getting food. Make sure that there's medicine that they're getting that gets dropped off. Don't hang out and schmooze with them. There's nothing wrong with dropping it off at their front porch. Baruch Hashem, we have a tremendous amount of technology. I think it's a little bit unfortunate. One of the major conference call companies went down this morning because there's hundreds of businesses and yeshivas and others that are trying to conference in. Technology is certainly on our side, and we're asked to do this. This is the Hirah Shah. This is what we got to do.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Yehudah, for your time.
Chalta.
Joining us from Brooklyn is Rabbi Avrohom Sandler. He's a Maggid Shiur. He's also a Talmud and a Musbach of Tarbadas and mechaber sefarim. Welcome, Rabbi Avrohom.
Shalom Aleichem, Rav David. So,
what's your message? I know you had a message.
Yeah, my message is that closing shuls and closing yeshivas for health reasons is a terrible idea. I'm not discussing the issue of Ava. In other words, once the government decides that the shuls and the yeshivas have to close down, there is no question that we have to comply because of Ava, even if this entire coronavirus theory is made up from scratch. Of course, we have to comply with whatever the government says. So at this point, this is halacha v'lo made up.
Do you think it may be made up?
No, I don't think it's certainly not totally made up. There's certainly people who are dying from the disease. I basically have 3 points to make, 3 very quick points.
Okay.
The first issue is we should ask ourselves, are we overreacting to this coronavirus? So far in America, about 100 people died, none of them less than the age of 50. There was a couple of winters ago, 80,000 Americans died from the flu. I never heard anybody saying 2 years ago that we should be closing shuls. This coronavirus right now, a lot of it is hype. So, for example, in Italy, 15,000 die every year from the flu. This year, about 1,500, maybe the number is more by now, died from the coronavirus, and we're wondering why so many are dying from coronavirus. But when 15,000 die in Italy, ein poitze pel mitzavtzef. Nobody says boo. Yeah.
But Rabbi Sandler,
yeah.
1 week ago, it was 300 people. In 1 week, it's gone up to 1,800 people, multiple by 500% in 1 week. That means if they don't do their containment measures, next week, if you just continue the math, it'll be 7,500 people, and the next week it'll be 45,000 people. This is math, third grade math.
Okay,
so, have you ever seen the flu's death rate multiply by 5x in 1 week?
It could. I'm not familiar with the flu statistics, but the issue is we don't know, and this leads to a second point is...
Well, what do you mean we don't know? This is data. We're following the data. It's doubling every 4 days, right? In New York State, it's doubling every 4 days. Every place is being tracked. It's doubling every 4 days, and the death rate is going up by 5x weekly, right?
Let me ask...
The flu, I agree. Years and years of statistics. Right?
I agree. Today,
do you know that according to the mathematicians from the World Health Organization cited in the New York Times today and yesterday, said that if we don't contain it, there will be more deaths from coronavirus this year in the United States than cancer and heart attack combined.
Okay.
Now, do you believe the flu has any chance of being worse than a cancer diagnosis?
I do not believe that. But the issue is there's 2 issues. We have to parse 2 issues. One issue is what is the chance of dying today from coronavirus? You're right. In a week from now, it may be much greater than the flu. The question is today, how many people in America during the height of the flu season, a few hundred die every day? Today, there aren't a few hundred people.
So we should wait until it's spread and have 50,000 or 100,000 a week deaths, and then we should do something.
So again, now you're switching to the second issue. Again, there are 2 issues. The question is, what is your risk today? Right. I'm saying there's 2 issues.
In a hot spot. I'm saying in a hot spot, where it is, right? Your chances of dying every week multiply by 5x.
Okay, so I agree. It may be also to go to shul next week. The question is, going to shul today. The question is, going to shul today, what is the risk? Now you're discussing, yes.
I said a story last week on the air. A developer falls off his building. He's 40, 50, 40th floor, 30th. He passes by the 10th floor. Somebody says, "No, Yankel, how are things going?" He says, "So far, things are great." She's saying we should wait until it's totally not manageable and not containable.
Okay, so now we
should say wait.
No, I agree. We should assess on a day-by-day basis regarding your specific risk. Let's say you don't care about the rest of the community. Just, again, we could discuss the rest of the community, but just your personal risk. This morning, had you shown up to shul, you would have had a bigger chance of dying from the flu, according to shul, than the coronavirus. This morning, now going to shul next week, it may be a greater risk. Now you have the separate discussion, which is the rest of the community. What about the rest of the community? In other words, we don't want to enable the community spread. That's a separate discussion.
No, not about the rest. About you and your family. Your family's chances of dying increase by 5x every single week that you have exposure.
I agree. So next week, it may be also to go to shul. The question is, what about today?
What about today?
Right. Today, for me to go to shul, I have a bigger chance of going to shul and catching the flu and dying than going to shul and catching coronavirus. I don't, but the
Shulchan Aruch famously says, right, in Ochel Shem Kippur, that when we have a shaila about pikuach nefesh, who do you go to? A doctor. So when the World Health Organization, when the CDC, of not just the United States, of so far they have 130 countries in the world, 97 of whom have it already, are all bepe'achas saying that the death rate is someplace between 0.5% and 6%, right? So do we listen to a person who has no statistical, no mathematical, no medical, right? No epidemiological degree, or do we listen to all the experts in the world? If you were Rav, what would you answer the shaila?
I would answer that you have to quote accurately. When they're saying that 6% or 0.6 or 0.2%, or in Germany it's 0.25%, it's of those who were tested. Somebody who tests positive, he will have. Because somebody who is coming and is testing positive, he already has symptoms. Yeah.
So when all the experts say that if the disease spreads in the United States this year, it will kill more people than cancer and heart disease combined this year, and it will happen within 7 months, right? Mm-hmm. Are we to believe those statistics or not?
There's certainly a possibility that will happen.
Okay, so let me ask you, if there's a possibility if that's a possibility to happen, right? And if every week that we don't do something to stop it, it becomes more dangerous, would this rise to the level of pikuach nefesh?
Next week, it may rise to the level of pikuach nefesh.
So let me ask you a question. We have a tape clip here of in Cornell, the ethics committee met yesterday.
Yep.
That they don't have enough ventilators, and who to give the ventilators to. Right? Okay. And the same thing is happening at Cornell and at Columbia, right? That right now in Borough Park, there are 10 people on ventilators and over 100 people who have it. Of the 10 people who have it, right, the assumption is that 4 will die. Okay. Does that rise to the level of pikuach nefesh in our community? In Crown Heights, there are close to 100 people who have it. There are a number of people in critical condition.
Having it means nothing.
There are a number of people in critical condition on ventilators. We're going to have on Rabbi Kassirer. He's going to try to give us statistics, even though HIPAA is going to make it a little difficult, but he's going to give us statistics. So we can see in the next 2 or 3 weeks many levias because of that. Does that rise in your eyes, in your opinion, to the eyes of pikuach nefesh?
Once we can show that going to shul gives you more of a 1 in 1,000 chance. Now, I can explain why some of those people are dying. There is a concept called a nocebo effect. That means that a certain percentage of people who are told, you will die, they will ultimately die. So a placebo effect, which is the reverse, where you tell somebody good news that this pill will make you better, it works somewhere between 20 and 40% of the time. The flip side of that, again, is the nocebo effect. You tell a lot of people you will die, certain percentage will die. The coronavirus has been so hyped. Okay. Yes, because again, I want to make shalom between the death numbers and what the Health Czar of Ohio said. The Health Czar of Ohio says there's 100,000 people who have it, and 0 have died so far. She wasn't saying it to disagree with the CDC. She was saying we have a big problem. We have 100,000 people who are probably positive. How do I make shalom with that and with the people who are dying? And there's a very simple answer. The vast majority of people who catch the coronavirus, when they're told that they have the coronavirus, that makes them fearful. For a tiny percentage of those people, we're talking about, you said, a 5% death rate, it's perfectly understandable to see how the nocebo effect is responsible for some of the deaths, which is why...
the deaths they are dying of fear. It's like watching a bad movie, sort of, and dying of fear?
There is, again, this is scientific fact. I don't know how many are dying from the nocebo effect. We certainly know many of them are. That's no question. This is a scientific fact.
They're dying of fear.
They're dying of fear because there's misinformation. Because people don't realize. Yeah, again, because you admit 2% of the NBA tested positive. 2%. What percent of the population is positive? What percent would you say? And it's not just the NBA. It's politicians. It's people who have access to testing are testing positive. So do you think Hashem is punishing politicians? Hashem is punishing basketball players? So what do you think?
I think that people who play in arenas, right, and who get out a lot are at far greater risk than people who don't.
Okay, one of the players is injured. He's not even playing now. And one of the best players... And what about actors? It's actors, it's politicians.
Right, the people who...
No, and they say, there was an article in the Time magazine.
The more socially active you are, the less you isolate, the greater your chances are of coming down with it and killing your grandparents or parents if they're elderly, without a doubt. So what's your takeaway? Shul should be opened even though it's spreading it's doubling every 4 days. Is that your message?
My takeaway is that Rabbonim and leaders, yourself included, have to calm their flock.
1 in how many die has to be pikuach nefesh?
Well, pikuach nefesh is, as you mentioned, is 1 in 1,000. But I don't know if it'll ever be that. Again, there is reason to believe that the death rate is
less than 1 in 1,000. You're saying?
There's again, if you trust the health czar of Ohio,
it's less than 1 in 1,000.
Again, it has to be if 100,000 have it and 0 died.
Which is wonderful news because right now in
Borough
Park and Flatbush, right now in Borough Park and Crown Heights, there are over 200 people who have it. Right, there's a list under the Tehillim list. But the good news is only less than 1 in 1,000 will die, so we really have nothing to worry about. I'm going to replay this in a month, by the way. I'm just telling you. I'm playing it now. I'm going to replay it in a month. So right now, Baruch Hashem, of the hundreds of people, the 200 people in Crown Heights and Borough Park who have it, they have nothing to worry about because less than 1 in 1,000 will die of those who have it.
Until you mix in the nocebo effect, which again only affects 2% of patients, but that's who's dying, 2%.
The 2 in 1,000 that are dying of fear.
Maybe 1 is dying of fear, and 1 would have died even without the fear.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Sandler.
You're welcome.